lot of it has to do with the administrative effort that goes into it. Veterans struggle, daily, sometimes even make it to their own medical appointments with some of their issues and some of their disabilities. So a lot of the expungement has to do with access to communications and capabilities that they just may not have. These guys and gals are suffering TBIs, PTSD. The last thing they can do is read a paragraph and digest it and translate it and put pen to paper. So things like the expungement clinic and other resources actually, I have to say, spoon feeding us sometimes to help us out. We may have given up hope. What do we care? We can't get a job anyway. What do I care? I have a record. And so we've already defeated ourselves. And so getting the word out there that expungement of your records is critical and important. It does free up, some peace of mind at least, and like you stated, opportunities that they may have given up on already. So.
Yeah, I can speak personally, and I've always this has always been something that's been important to me. But it really came to a head when we were getting involved, and I was personally testifying for some of the adult use legislature that was introduced last year. And as Kevin mentioned, there was this discussion. A lot of these bills actually had automatic expungement included in them originally. And as he kind of addressed, there was a lot of discussion about automatic expungement, it being too expensive. There was a lot of discussions behind the reasons of its expense, which, there's a lot of miscommunication or lack of communication entirely with certain databases that, our court systems use. And, our police system doesn't necessarily communicate to our court system. And, they kind of would stress the fact that these systems not communicating properly was one of the main reasons that, automatic expungement would be such a large obstacle or a large project to tackle, and that it would be so expensive. And I can speak personally that when I was testifying and listening to this, the different testimony on this different adult use legislation, that's when I had the idea that hey, if we can't get the Maryland government to basically have automatic expungement introduced with this, then I'm going to do what I can, and I'm going to, Peak Relief as an organization, and we've been lucky enough to have a lot of other organizations help us out with this as well, as you can see with a lot of the different graphics that we've been introducing, to really try to take at least a piece of this for ourselves and try to contribute as much as we can to make sure that people can get their records expunged. Because, as Eryck and Kevin, we've been reiterating it a couple of times, finding meaningful employment, finding, cheap housing, people who possibly can't get into a university or some sort of, organization they might want to be able to contribute to just because they might have some sort of criminal record that in a lot of ways isn't necessarily even criminal anymore, and most certainly in a vast majority of our country. So I think it's time, that, I hope that we can get the Maryland legislature and the General Assembly to really take this up and honestly put a higher focus on, getting these records automatically expunged when hopefully we can get some adult use legislation passed. But until then, I feel very confident and, that we're going to be able to do the best we can to try to offer this to our community and hopefully change some lives. That's why I'm here. That's why all of us are here.
And kind of on the flip side of that, how would you empower patients to kind of demand that accountability and demand that transparency and demand that the cannabis businesses that are asking for their money, asking for their resources, their endorsement even, how would you equip a patient to better demand this type of action from cannabis businesses in this space?
I would say ask. It's the same thing I tell my kids: use your voice. The one thing no one can ever take from you, your voice. Whatever way you do it, you don't feel comfortable speaking, that's okay. Write something. You don't know how to write, tell a friend and have them help you figure out how to get that message out there. Everyone knows I'm not afraid to say anything or ask questions. So I will ask people, what are you doing locally? Right. I think it's great. I saw that you gave this to this national organization doing X. How does that benefit Marylanders? Because that's the jurisdiction I'm currently in. How does that benefit Montgomery County? Because that's where I live. And I don't take no for an answer. Don't give me your feel good answer. We're going to dig deeper than that.
Right. We believe that, expungement is part of a larger move towards real, reform, real criminal justice reform. And we've seen things like, HB 32, the Cannabis Legalization and Regulation, Inclusion, Restoration, and Rehabilitation Act come forward as efforts towards that type of reform. And, just as way of introduction, for those that aren't familiar, it was legislation that would legalize personal possession and home cultivation for adults, automatically expunge past cannabis offenses, establish a social equity program to ensure inclusion in the industry from disproportionately impacted communities, and reinvest a portion of that tax revenue to communities hardest hit by the war on drugs. So having said all of that, my question is, how integral do you feel expungement and or shielding needs to be when it comes to reform and real change in the cannabis space?
It needs to be what should be leading the charge. We shouldn't even have medical markets without talking about expungement and shielding and decreasing, if not eliminating, cannabis arrests, convictions, and contacts. We know even here in Maryland that even though there's not a law precluding medical cannabis access by qualified patients while they're on probation or while they're incarcerated and whatnot, that's not happening. There's no system in place. And in fact, in the past, there's been bills to explicitly preclude that from happening. So either cannabis needs to be medicine or it's not. And if we're not protecting medical cannabis patients' rights to access those things under all circumstances, then we're definitely not doing so for those who may not be able to become a qualified patient for whatever reason. So I think that we shouldn't even be having conversations about legalization or adult use markets without including that. But not including it is not enough. It's not enough to say, okay, we're going to have a social equity office or we're going to have some social equity licenses. Okay, well, who are we giving those to? Because if you're a Latinx millionaire, is that a social equity license? If you're a white Latino, is that a social equity license? And that's the thing, is these are the nuances of being a person of color, of living in a community of color, of being Indigenous, Latinx, Black, and they are not properly thought about because there's not enough of us in the rooms where these conversations are being held.
That's right.
So, instead what we're getting we're getting these checklists that say, well, I tried to hire a Black person, but it just didn't work out, but give me the points. Okay. That's not social equity. So my challenge to the industry would be that if our governments are not going to properly lay out these regulations to truly capture social equity and to truly bring Black, Indigenous, and Latinx communities into this cannabis boom, then it's incumbent upon the companies in the industry to do it. And this expungement clinic is one example of a great way to do that.
That's why I'm really excited, about this clinic to really be able to provide that level of support to our communities. And I think that, one of the really cool things too about our partnership is you and I have talked about this before, the geographic reach that we can have between our two, patient populations. I know that there's a lot of people who travel all over the state to obtain their medicine, but, kind of with the spread that we have, I'm really excited to just see how we can kind of grow this and make this reach further and further out into the Maryland patient community.
Totally. I think that is one of the best things about our partnership, just the geographic reach and demographical reach that we can have between our two stores. So I think that's awesome.
So I guess in your opinion, in addition to expungement clinics, how could businesses in the cannabis space continue to provide direct services to justice impacted communities?
Definitely. So I think that one thing we can definitely do is hire these people. In Maryland, we have legislation around hiring convicted felons. However, there can be exceptions to the rule. And I think that we as business owners should fight to ensure that there's inclusion from this perspective. I think it adds to the idea even of diversity within a workplace. Having someone who's had that background, gone through what they've been through, it adds a lot of context and I think, depth to a business to be able to add that type of diversity to even your leadership. So I think hiring and promoting individuals that have had interaction with the war on drugs, I think is really, really important for the culture of this industry. I think other things that businesses and consumers can do, we can, of course, financially support programs that advance expungement. If you can host events like this, or if you're an attorney that can volunteer your time to things like this, that's awesome. Also, we can fight legislatively to include language in bills that govern cannabis, and especially as adult use is something that we're going to be talking about for the next year or so in Maryland. I think that what we can do is make sure that there's language included that would automatically expunge all small, petty cannabis, nonviolent cannabis convictions. I think that that's a huge step in making sure that the process is really seamless. So like literally it just happens and people don't have to do much of anything to make sure it happens. I think that's a really great first step in righting that wrong. I don't think that it does everything. Just because you expunge someone's record doesn't mean that you can erase all of the emotional and physical damage that has been done through that experience. So I think that that's a really good first step. And after we get that done, I think we need to talk about, okay, what type of programs and resources are we giving these people to be able to either re-enter society successfully or just have the mental capacity to maintain, you know, a really healthy lifestyle as they continue on after their conviction.
You know, and lastly, one thing I would definitely stress for everybody that's watching, you know, if you are, you know, picking up your medicine from a dispensary, if you have a favorite company, you know, don't be afraid to ask them what they're doing to help the community. You know, don't be afraid to ask for a level of transparency and accountability in terms of what they're doing. If they're willing to accept your money, then they can accept your suggestions on how to improve, you know, their placement in the community, their relationship with the community that they're a part of, and, you know, communities that they, you know, serve, and how they can do that better. So I would encourage everyone to, you know, don't be shy in asking for more expungement clinics, for more veteran outreach initiatives, for more homelessness alleviation, for helping food drives, for, you know, whatever the case may be, for campaigning for more patient rights. Whatever is important to you in relation to this industry, there's a place for it, and there's a place for a business that exists in this industry to be a part of it.